We previously looked at what happened when you take a number and multiply by -1. Today we're going to look at what happens when you take a negative number and multiply by -1. So first note that we can go ahead and switch these because of the commutative property of multiplication. So we get -1 times -a. Then we can see that 1 times anything is itself, so therefore that just gives you -a. And you can drop the negative down. And we talk about the fact when you subtract a negative, it's the same as a positive, therefore we have positive a. And in math, we normally don't write the plus sign, even though a lot of times that actually helps us understand. So we can just go ahead and remove the plus sign, and we have our final answer. A negative number, so -a for example, times -1 gives you positive a back. It's kind of weird when you first see it, but we just showed you why it's true. Let me show you a few other ways of thinking about it. Say we have -1 and we multiply that by -1. Well, normally -1 times +1 would give you -1, right? When you multiply by -1, when you multiply by a negative number, essentially what you're doing is subtracting. So you have to subtract that -1. And again, that's a double negative, which gives you a positive, and therefore you get +1 back. You could do the same thing for -3. And think of it this way. If you're multiplying -3 times -1, if it was a positive 3 times -1, you would add -1 3 times to get -3, right? But it's a -3. So you're actually, in effect, subtracting -1 3 times. And that can be really confusing, but again, if it's a positive 3, you're adding -1 3 times. If it's a -3, you're subtracting -1 3 times. Therefore, you actually, because it's double negative, you have 3 positive ones, which just gives you 3 back. Therefore, -3 times -1 gives you +3. And we can do the same thing for -9. We would be subtracting -1 9 times, and they all become positive, and therefore we end up with +9. So in general, we've shown that -9 times -1 equals +9. We can also show that for any number. -a times -1 gives you +a. So again, the name of this lesson is multiplying a negative number by -1. And we get the positive of that number back. Let's look at some examples together. -9, let's actually go ahead and read this together as a mark it. -9 times -1 gives you what number back? Hopefully you can see that it would give you the +9 back, right? So negative times negative is a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. Again, it can get confusing, so try to think about why it's true, and then also just as we repetitiously do this, it will become more solidified concept. All right, -5/4 times what number gives you +5/4 back? Now notice you can't put 1 in there because it would give you -5/4 back. So hopefully you start to see that it's got to be a negative number to give you a positive number back. Again, this is a negative number, this is a negative number, and negative times negative gives you a positive back. Okay, what number times -1 gives you +1.7? Well, hopefully you can understand that it must be a negative number. And if I multiply -1, then these two numbers should be the same, right? So the answer is going to be -1.7. Negative times negative gives you positive. -50 times -1 is going to give you +50 back. And again, simplify just means make as simple as possible, or shorten. In rare cases, you actually simplify something and it ends up not being shorter, but that's the exception to the rule. How about this? Simplify -5 times -1. Well, notice that this is fairly long. This is very short. And again, we just simplified it. -5 times -1 gives you +5, which is simpler than what we started with. All right, let's try this one. -pi times -1. Hopefully you're seeing this concept starting to click. You have two negatives, which makes a positive, and therefore the answer is +pi. Yes, you could write this, and I would count that as correct, but in mathematicians in general like to make things short, so we just write pi, not +pi. How about this? -y, so any number, any negative number, y just means some number, it could be 1.7, whatever. -y times -1 give you +y back. That would be true for -x, Negative x, again, just the same thing. It's any number, right? That would give you a positive x back if you multiply by negative 1. How about negative m times n times negative 1? Well, you have a negative number times a negative 1. Again, m times n just gives you a number, right? It could be 7, 8, whatever, negative 43. So if that's just a number, then you're still just taking a negative number and multiplying by negative 1, you get the same thing back. And again, here's kind of like a little proof to show why that is. We can reverse this because of commutative property of multiplication. Then you have 1 times that, negative mn, which gives you negative mn. You can go ahead and leave the negative there. That's out front. Two negatives make a positive, and therefore your answer is mn, which is why that is true. So a negative number times negative 1, this is the rule, gives you the positive number a back. And that's actually it for this lesson. So it's a very simple concept. Hopefully it's clicking by now. And it's very important because it comes up a lot when you start to work out problems. You'll see a lot of times you'll be taking a negative number and multiplying by a negative number, negative 1, and you'll get the positive version of that number back.